Okay, good morning. So we are doing today Gimel and Aleph. We are up to Beis Amud Beis, the last of the wide line. Just to remind where we were yesterday. So we started mentioning that there's a drasha at the end of the pasuk at the end of Parshas Pinchas, where we discuss the various different karbanos that are brought on Sukkot. So we mentioned that on the second day, and on the sixth day, and on the seventh day, we have what seems to be differences in the regular way that it's written. If you remember the laning that you do on Kalamite Sukkot, it always sounds like exactly the same. Like anybody could lane that. They're all the same sukkah. There's a few couple exceptions. That's when you know somebody actually knows how to lane, or somebody who's just getting up there doing because it's the same. Because they always make that mistake of Veniska or in Tzachel, right? That's the easy one. So if you look in these psukim there, you'll see on the second day it says v'niskam, on the sixth day it says unsachel, and then on the last day it says kamishpatam. Each one of these is different than what it normally would say, which is v'niska and kamishpat. So these three extra or different differences that we find on these 3 days, the extra words we are saying have an extra mem, an extra yud, and an extra mem. So that spells mayim v'niskam. We have an extra mem, and then on sechel instead of say beniska, so we have the word the extra yud, and then the last one kamishpatam, instead of saying kamishpat, we have an extra mem. So essentially, we end up with a reference to mayim. That reference to mayim hints to us that there's something about water that's relevant on sukkahs. Obviously, we know what's relevant about water on sukkahs in the sense that the ritzay alamayim in terms of the dalaminim, we have the connection for us now, though, is in relation. We have the Arav, we have a variety of things that have to do with water on Sukkot. But what we want to connect it to now is in relation to what we want to connect it to is the relation to the saying of Mashif Aruach. So we said in the Gemara again on base on the bottom, in the wide lines. We said Rabbi Huda Sarah says that you start saying it on the second day, right? We had Rabbi Lezer says you start saying on the first day. You have Rabbi Shua says you say it on the end of Achron. What that means, we'll find out. And we have Rabbi Kiva says you say it on the sixth day. Those are the four different opinions that we had from when you start saying Mashiv Ruach. So the Gemara continues now in the wide lines. Again, we saw yesterday, Rabbi says you say it on the second day. Why? Because you have these three extra letters, which spelled Mayim. And since the first one is on the second day, so therefore we start saying Mashiv Ruach on the second day. And yesterday we explored and now we want to explore today Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva, second the bottom line on the bottom of the page. Rabbi Akiva Aimer, what does Rabbi Akiva say? Mishishi b'chag u'maskir. Rabbi Akiva says you start saying Mashiv Ruach on the sixth day of Sukkot. Shenemar, why? Mishishi, because it says on the sixth day unsochel b'shnei nesuchen akasim medaber. The pasuk on the sixth day is referencing the additional nesach by having a plural instead of saying miniska and its libation, it says unsacha and its libations. So that's a reference to the fact that there's more than one. There's two. So now one's going to be nisach a libation of water, and one's going to be a libation of wine. And therefore, since we're doing now one of water, not just of wine, so therefore you see that you start saying Mashiv Ruach on the sixth day of Sukkot. Now, explains Rashi, what does it mean that it says it's going to have two nisachin, two libations on one carbon. Abo viniskam, but the word viniskam that we had, which was extra, and that came about on the second day, which over there was saying it's an extra from the mem. So why does Rabbi Kiva darshan that? That you can't dash because that's mashma harbe. That's mashma a lot of nesachim. The karbanis harbe, talking about a lot of karbanis and a lot of nesachim. That's Rabbi Kiva min beniskam. That's Rabbi Kiva is not darshing from beniskam. Whereas Rabbi Kiva, as we're going to see, it's not that he denies that beniskam doesn't have an extra mem. He acknowledges that. But he's saying that is a reference to a lot of nesachim, a lot of karbanis that doesn't really tell me what I need to know, which is that we're doing one specifically of water. When do I find out that we're doing one specifically of water, as opposed to yayin? We find it on the sixth day. So that's how we find it on the sixth day. That's why I start saying Mashiv Ruach on the sixth day. That's the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Back to Gemara. I understand that you're saying that you have two nesachim on the sixth day, but who says that one is a nisach of mayim? Maybe they're both Nesachim of Yayin. After all, Nesachim of Yayin is the commonplace one. You want to now say there's a Nisach of Mayim. What told you that? All you're saying is that from the word Unsacheh, as opposed to Veniska, is that there's two Nesachim. So Shkoyach, I accept the fact that there's two Nesachim. Maybe there's two Nesachim of wine. Who said that one has to be of water? And if I don't know that one is of water, then by definition, I don't have Mashav Ruach again. That's the most question. We turn out to give him an Aleph. So it says the more like Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah, Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah. The Amar Ramizi Maya. Rabbi Akiva holds of Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah, who says that there's a hint of water here. In other words, imagine that Rabbi Akiva doesn't have Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah. All he has is that we wake up one morning and we hear Rabbi Akiva sheet is that you start saying Mashav Baruch on the sixth day, and he says why? Because it says Unsacheha. That's an extra yud. So therefore, that teaches me we should say the Mashav Baruch because there's two Nesachim, one of mayim, one of water. You'd be like, what? What do you want? Why? Maybe there's an extra libation that they have wine. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Kiva contemplates Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah. He's geboit. He's building himself off on Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah. Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah said that there's in fact a whole hint of mayim throughout those psukim. Rabbi Kiva agrees with that. Rabbi Kiva says there is a hint of mayim going out through these psukim. Now, the hint of mayim is through these extra three words, these extra three letters in these three words of Beniskeim, Utzachel, Mishpatam, the Mem Gimem. He agrees with that. But Rabbi Kiva only says that you start saying Mashav Baruch on the sixth day, because on the sixth day you see that the word Utzachel is referring to two. So that is to say, from Beniskeim, which is mashma many Nesachim, many Karbanis, I wouldn't know anything, because then I would just say, it's a lot of Karbanis, a lot of Nesachim, but just talking about the plurality of Karbanis that one brings. One brings so many Karbanis, 70 animals, right? So I wouldn't know anything about water. I wouldn't know anything about Mashav Ruach. But once I see that there is a hint of mayim through these three extra letters, and on the sixth day I say unsacheh, which tells me that there are two nesachim, specifically two, then now I'll say, that's coming to tell me that on this day we actually bring a nisach of water, and therefore we should start saying Mashav Baruch on that day. That's the way Rabbi Kiva wants to learn. Again, no, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. It says that the word mayim is hinted there. So if like Rabbi Yehuda never say. So then why doesn't he say like Rabbi Yehuda? Why not just say simply that there is Mashav Baruch on the second day? Why are you saying it's the sixth? So the Gemara says no, that because of Rabbi Kiva holds Hiksiv Nisach Yisera B'Shish Yudasif. When does it say an extra Nisach? That's on the sixth day. But on the second day, when it says V'Niskeim, it doesn't tell you that it's an extra Nisach. It just tells you that there's many Nisachim and there's many Karbanos because Pesukah says so many. That doesn't tell you that there's one extra. There's something different going on. So on the second day, when it mentions V'Niskeim, it could just be like tons of Nisachim, tons of Karbanos, talking about all of wine. So there's a hint. I see a hint when I go through all those three extra letters. I see a hint mayim. Okay. But when do I see that there's actually one specifically of water? I only see that on the sixth day. Since I only see that on the sixth day, that's why I start saying Mashav Baruch on the sixth day. That's the pshat of Rabbi Kiva. It's Gimboit on Rabbi Yehuda, but it's not Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see the top Rashis. Someone like Rabbi Yehuda, Lamb like Rabbi Yehuda. She asks him b'shein. So then say like Rabbi Yehuda and say it on the second day. So the Gemara says no. Nisach Yisrael b'shish yichsev. When do you see an actual extra nisach? You only see that on the sixth day. The word unsacheh, the marbi trei nisachim, that's telling me that there are two nisachim. That's only ksiv b'shishi. That only see on the sixth day. That's why he says let's start saying it on the sixth day. The hani mem yud mem, and the mayim works to teach me the loy matzinu l'mem tarvar diyayin. That teaches me enough to say that there's not going to be two of wine, because there's a hint there that's going to be used for something. But when, that you don't know from Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah. That you only know from Unzachel. Good. That's the first bit of the Gemara. This next bit of the Gemara is not exactly 100% connected to that. It's a bit separate. So it says the Gemara, Tanya, Rabbi Nassan says as follows. We have the pasuk. We say every Rosh Chodesh, Bak Chodesh, right? The pasuk is talking about during the carbon Taanit. So if you think about the end of Parashas Pinchas, you have the parsha of the Talmud, right? That opens up then the parsha after that of all the Yom Tov, right? You talk about Pesach and you talk about Shavuos and you talk about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and Sukkot is at the end, right? That's what we were dealing with right now. These hints was all at the end of the parsha. So now we're going back to the very beginning of the parsha of the Karbanis, which is the parsha of the Taanit. So Nosson says, Bak Kodesh, Hasech Nesech Sheikh Al Hashem. Right, we learn in Pasuk that the pasuk is telling us that you do a hasech, you do a libation when you do the carbon tamid. So what is the when you read this pasuk? So you can say bak kodesh hasech sheich al Hashem. No, if you said you just want to talk that you have to do a libation, so why do you have to say two times? Says Rabbi Nassan and bak kodesh hasech nesech sheich al Hashem b'shnei nesachon hakasim medaber echon nisach hamayim echon nisach hayayin. So Ibn Nassim says that you see that you have two types of nesachin by the carbon tamid. One is a nisach of mayim, one's a nisach of yayin. And how do I know that? Because I have a double lashon. Ba'kodesh hasech nesach sheich al Hashem. So the Gemara says, 1 second. The same question we asked by Rabbi Akiva, Emer tarvayu dechamra. Ibn Nassim, it's very nice that you hold that there's two nesachim by the carbon tamid. And just to make it clear, it says by the carbon tamid shabben abayim, you do the same thing you do by the carbon tamid shal shachris. So it'll be essentially 4 libations, right? 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. This pasuk of Hakadosh Nesach Shechar is only talking about the morning one, but the pasuk continues there and says, "Ve'is takeves hasheni taseh ben rabbayim keminchas haboker taseh." Right, so you do the carbon tamid of Shabbat Rabbayim, you do like the carbon tamid of the Shachris. But according to Nassan, you see already by the carbon tamid that you do a nisach of mayim. How did he know that? Because the pasuk says, "Ba'kodesh hasech nesech sheich al Hashem." So then, let's say maybe one is of the one is of water, one is of wine. Let's say emer tavar de chamro. Let's say they're both of wine. You can't let them cry. Hasech hasech, nesech nesech. Right? Let's say that use the same lashon. Just say hasech. If you have to say grammatically, do you want to say two? So then say hasech hasech. You want to say nesech nesech, fine. But my hasech nesech, why is he changing the lashon? Therefore, I see that one is going to be of wine and one is going to be of water. Already by the common tabid, you already have 2 types of nesach and one of yain and one of water. It says Rashi. Right, from the fact that the Torah changes the lashon, so I see that you have to do 2 nesachim. This continues Gemara. So this that we learned that Nisach Hamayim calls Zayin. So now we're getting back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so we have like an interesting interlude here, telling you something similar. Ibn Nassan also holds that there's a Nisach Hamayim, and that's by the Karban Tamid, and how we know that also a change in a lashon that he was able to focus on the change in the lashon being Hasech Nesech rather than Hasech Hasech or Nesech Nesech. And so therefore for Rabbi Nassan, we have a clear proof, and it's a similar one to what we just saw. Now the Gemara goes back to asking a question about the situation of Sukkot. So back to Gemara, we know we have a Mishnah that tells us that you do the Nesachim all 7 days of Sukkot. We do the Nesachim all 7 days of Sukkot. Now we're not talking about Nesachim of wine, but Nesach Hamayim, Nesachim of water. So according to what Rabbi Kiva just told us, when do you start saying Mashav Ruch on the 6th day? Why? Because you have Nisach, which is telling you that there's an extra one, not a Nisach of Yayin, but a Nisach of Mayim. And then when does that start? That starts on the 6th day. So the question is then, according to Rabbi Akiva, you obviously do not have what? Nisach Hamayim for all 7 days. You only have Nisach Hamayim for 2 days. You're starting on the 6th day. You're not having it on the first days of Sukkot. So for the Gemara, this time we learned in the Mishnah, Nisach Hamayim called Zayin Mani. This time we learned in the Mishnah that says that you have Nisach Hamayim for all 7 days. Who is the Tana of this Mishnah? Rabbi Yeshua, if it's going to be Rabbi Yeshua, Nemachad Yoma. If it's Rabbi Yeshua, then it's to be only 1 day. Why? Because when does Rabbi Yeshua say that he starts saying Mashav Ruach? He says he starts saying Mashav Ruach on the 7th day. Mishas Hanachas, said the Mishnah. So it can't be Rabbi Yeshua. That's obvious. He doesn't hold of Nisach Hamayim for all 7 days. If it's going to be according to Rabbi Akiva, that will only be the Nisach Hamayim for 2 days, because he only holds you start doing on the 6th. Right? You have Nisach Hayayin, sure, but Nisach Hamayim only on the 6th day, so you have 6 and 7. So you only get 2 days for Rabbi Akiva. So then who's it going to be? Zak the Gemara. If she's a Yaima. If it's going to be according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, what did Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira say you start saying on the 2nd? So if you start saying on the 2nd day, Mashav Ruach, so that's the end up being, you do the math, is 6 days. So you don't end up having what? Any rabbi in the Mishnah says 7 days. As Rashi is going to point out, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Right? Who do we have that we know? Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer 7 days. So Rashi is going to be bothered. Why does the Gemara ask this question? Elohod, it's an anis b'chamayim calls line mani. Who is it? Rabbi Shua Nemachad. Rabbi Kiva Trey Yami. Rabbi Yehuda Shisa Yami. What do you mean? You have Rabbi Lezer. It works out perfectly according to Rabbi Lezer. Why not mention Rabbi Lezer? He says you start the Mashivach on the first day. So for him, you have 7 days, and it's great. It's wonderful. You don't have any problems. So we're going to have to wait till Rashi. We'll see what Rashi tries to explain why we don't mention it according to Rabbi Lezer. So the more answers, no, it's actually going according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira. Was for you like Rabbi Yehuda the Masnisen. This Nisach Hamayim is going for all 7 days. This is going according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, and he holds like Rabbi Yehuda of the Mishnah. What do you mean? Because we learned Rabbi Yehuda said what? But like Haya Menasech Kol Shemaina. Rabbi Yehuda said that when he does the Nesachin, he does it with a leg. It's a certain measurement of the amount, and he does the Kol Shemaina. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, how long do you do the Nesachin? 8 days, right? So it doesn't work according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's shita is you do Nesachin for 8 days, including Shmini Atzeres. So how does it help us? Ma'afek Rishon and Ma'al Shmini. So according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is going to learn, take out the first day, right? Because he doesn't hold of the first day. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says you only start on the second day. Ma'al Shmini, you can keep the 8th day, which then gives you how many? You're back to 7, right? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, he also doing the Nesachim all 8 days. That doesn't work with the Mishnah. This Mishnah is saying Nisach Hamayim for only 7 days. So how's that going to work? It's going to work contributing to Masera, but you're going to knock out the first day, and then you have 7 days left, and there you go. It could be the Shita Kabir, Rabbi Masera holds these are Chamayim for all 7 days. Says the Gemara, really? Umayshna Rishon Deloy, the Chiramizi Mayim B'Sheni Udiramizi. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda Masera? They say you're very insistent. Rabbi Yehuda Masera says you only start on the second day, not on the first day. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda Masera says that when does this remez of Mayim start? The remez of Mayim starts only on the second day, because you only have V'niskeim listed on the second day. Right? Remember, Rabbi Yehuda Masera's Madam rolls V'niskeim, U'nsachel, Kimishpatam, Mem, Yud, Mem, that's the hint. And when is the first hint? When is that first extra letter? First extra letter from the Mem of V'niskeim was on the second day. So according to Rabbi Yehuda Masera, you can only start saying Mashav Arach on the second day. So then, I understand, it says the Gemara, that Rabbi Yehuda Masera is very insistent on starting on the second day because the hints only start on the second day. Fine. But it says the Gemara, I understand you can't start on the first day because the first hint of the mem only comes on the second day, because that's when you have the hint of Mayim. So Shmini Nami Kiramizi Mayim is Shmini Hudi Ramizi. So the last hint, which was from Kimishpatam, instead of saying Kimishpat, so the last extra mem is when? On the 7th day. So then you shouldn't be having anything on the 8th day. Why are you saying that there's the special Nisach Hamayim on the Shmini Atzeres? The hints stop on the 7th day. So according to Rabbi Yehuda Masera, how many days you should have Nisach Hamayim? Only 6 days. So you don't get the 7 days. So that's the more question. It can't be Rabbi Yehuda Masera. Says the Ma'ashna Rishon the Lord the Chiramizi Mayim Sheni Udir Mizi Shmini Nami the Chiramizi Mayim Shvi Udir Mizi. So the Gemara says it doesn't work. It doesn't work according to Rabbi Yehuda Masera. You cannot fit it in. So now the Gemara says we can't fit it in according to Rabbi Yehuda Masera. We obviously can't fit it in according to Rabbi Shua. We can't fit it in according to Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Lezer we're not asking about. So what are we going to do? Answers the Gemara, Ela Rabbi Shua. You know what? Let's say it's Rabbi Shua. Let's say it's Rabbi Shua. V'nisoch hamayim kol shiva hilchos hagemirila. And what does it mean when we say nisach hamayim is all 7 days? That's a hilchos hagemirila. For those who have been on the Sunday classes, we've talked about halacha mashmir sinai. I spent a couple of weeks on this. This hilchos hagemirila is a reference to halacha l'mashmir sinai. Damar Rabbi Yochanan v'shum Rabbi Nechuni ish bakas beis charson. Right, so a whole long list of names, but fundamentally, this is a lesson that we are learning about halacha mashmir sinai. That we have many of them, but here are 3. Eser netiyos. There's a specific halacha about shvius. When you're sometimes, we know by shvius you're not allowed to plant You're not allowed to take care of the fields. But the rabbis instituted various gezeras even before the seventh year starts. And Tosfos elaborates even further. Well, we won't have a chance to go real deep into it, but just basically, there are certain times you have exception that we say, even though the rabbis say that you're not supposed to be ready watering, taking care of this stuff before Shvi'ah, but by Esronatias, by saplings, by new trees, then we make an exception. So you can keep on watering that even later. So that's one situation where you have a halacha mishmishina that says you could do it. Arava, Arava is a major institution on Sukkot, right? We have the taking around of the Arava, putting the Aravas in the Mizbech, all of that. That's halacha mishmishina. We call it minig neviim. Also, it's not a topic we can do more right now, but it's a very interesting one. And the last is Nisach Hamayim. Nisach Hamayim is halacha mishmishina, says the Gemara, and therefore could be according to Rabbi Yeshua. And what does that mean? It means Rabbi Yeshua said that you don't mention Mashav Rachel Sukkot Wakta Simon Kalala, and therefore when you start saying it only Mishas Hanachasa, you only say B'Yom Tov Acharon, you don't do it by Sukkot. Fine. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, it works out now to say that you could, however, do the Nisachim of Mayim all 7 days. Why? You shake lulav and esrog all 7 days. It's a ritzi of Mayim. Mayim is a simon klala. Okay, it's fine. Mayim having davening for water, being maskir, that we're saying, no, don't do that, it's a simon klala. But to have a ritzi of Mayim, that we have no problem with the Arba Minim. It's a ritzi of Mayim. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't say you can't do it. That's the whole mitzvah of the Yantiv. No problem. Says Rabbi Yeshua, same is true with regards to Nisach Hamayim. Nisach Hamayim is also allowed all 7 days. It's not because of the fact that he's learning it out from any sort of psukim or anything like that. No, it's a halacha Moshe Sinai. Halacha Moshe says that you do it. Halacha Moshe says you do it. Obviously, it's not a problem with someone klala. Now I'll ask you a question. Why is it that the Gemara is concluding that Rabbi Yeshua is the one who should say that it's like, and that Nisach Hamayim Kol Shiva is halacha Moshe Sinai? Why isn't it better? Why is that, or I should say, why is that better than saying it's Rabbi Yehuda ben Seira and it's Halach Moshe Sinai, or it's Rabbi Kiva and say it's Halach Moshe Sinai? Why specifically Rabbi Yeshua? No one asks this, but I say as a matter of Bashar Pshat, it has to be because according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Seira and according to Rabbi Akiva, you're starting out in the middle of Sukkot. There's clearly an institution of introducing more amount of water in the middle of Sukkot, right? According to Rabbi Yehuda ben Seira on the second day. According to Rabbi Akiva on the 6th day. According to Rabbi Yeshua was absolutely no. We cannot do it any time on Sukkot. Why? Because it's simon klal. We can't introduce it. So then, according to Rabbi Yeshua, it's galakt why you're going to say then there's going to be a Nisach Hamayim all 7 days. It's not a part of our regular way of understanding of Mashav Arach. It's something entirely separate institution. But according to them, who are going to be saying well, it starts in the 2nd day or starts in the 6th day, then it's a little weird. Why is it that we're going to have Al Chumash Mishnah that says that you do this on all 7 days when our mentioning our haskara of it is starting on the 2nd day or starting on the 6th day? The halacha misina is a little bit not connected or seem disjointed from it, in the sense that if you're being masked the water specifically on this day, it sounds like on this day is really when it starts. So if it's this day really when it starts, then why is the Nisach Hamayim going on all 7 days? You can still say, well, the weekend it's fine. But according to Rabbi Yeshua, says no, we can't do it because there's simon klala. So then, according to him, that's why you need halacha Moshe Mishnah to say that you do it and you do it all 7 days because this is not going to be a problem. The same way it's not going to be a problem with regards to the Arba Minim. Again, is it a perfect answer? I'm not sure, but that is clearly the Gemara is leaning on saying it according to Rabbi Yeshua. You could have maybe learned it also and said, look, if you say by Rabbi Yeshua, you could also say by all of them. Why am I focusing on this point? Because if you remember, one of the things that we discussed when we're doing the halacha Moshe topic is there are disputes about whether or not things are halacha Moshe Sinai. What do the Rambam say? There cannot be a dispute. If any time there is a true halacha Moshe Sinai, what do you have to say? There's absolutely never been a dispute about it from the beginning of time, from the beginning of the Torah being given till today. There's never been a dispute about it. That's what we had. All the questions in the Shuvah in Kuf Sadi Beis, the Chavaz Yor, massive list of questions on the Rambam. But you see that there is a machlokes on halacha Moshe Sinai. Not everybody accepts all of it. This would be potentially an inherent question, right, on the Rambam, right? Because in other words, if Rabbi Yeshua is the only one who is being mitukam, this idea that halacha Moshe Sinai is all 7 days for the for the Nisach Hamayim, and not according to Rabbi Yehuda and not according to Rabbi Akiva, then you have the fundamental machlokes on whether or not something is halach l'shmei or not. That is a question that would be a fundamental challenge to the Rambam's approach. Right? That makes sense. So it either the Rambam will say what I just said against what I just said, which is that no, according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rabbi Akiva, it also goes with them. They also don't disagree. But the Gemara is saying Rabbi Yeshua, just to maximize the chiddush, say even according to Rabbi Yeshua, so then because that's the most radical, right? He says you never mention water at all, anytime over sukkot. Oh, so then that would be potentially the way to understand it. But if you said there really isn't machlokes, the Gemara is saying it's only going according to Rabbi Yeshua, but not according to anybody else. So then you would have a question on the Rambam, one of the Chavas Yair's questions. I don't remember the Chavas Yair asking this one, but this will be another potential question. I have to double check and see if he does. Another thing we would have to check is that here the Gemara says on these three, and I have to double check if this is in the list of the Rambam. I know, I'm pretty sure that Nisach Hamayim was, but I don't remember, and SNTS was, but I don't remember if Arava is. So I have to double check that and see, and keep with bated breath. Well, let you know tomorrow, just to see what the Rambam says. Okay. Continues the Gemara. Oh, we have to do some Rashis. Yeah, so what did Rashi tell us? Says Rashi, we have to answer the question of Rabbi Lezer also, yeah? So let's go to that big Rashi. So just start from the top of the narrow line. Our country, it's only going to be for 6 days, not more. It's only for 2 days. I'm sorry, not more because he's starting on the 6th day. He holds like a Rehuda of our Mishnah. The Amar Beloig have a Menasach Kol Shemaina. So Rehuda says that you do it all 8 days. You do Nisach Hamayim. So Rehuda is a sort of a fundamental shita, which is saying all 8 days. But Rehuda Maser is not agreeing with him. Lo Savar Kavasei. He doesn't hold like him. Amar Kol Shemaina Menasach. He doesn't hold like him that you need all 8 days to do Nisach Hamayim. El B'Mad Amar V'Shmini Menasach. But rather, he says that you do Nisach on Shmini Atzeres. The came in the Mishini Menasach. And since you do Nisach on Shmini Atzeres, so then it works according to Rabbi Yehuda. You start on the 2nd day. Why? Because then you end up with 7 days of Nisach Hamayim. Says the Gemara, really? So we'll light over this Rashi the way he says it. The Mafik Rishon Ma'al Shmini says Meshiv Baal HaGemara. The Gemara is a clear example of, that doesn't sound like a normal Rashi. Meshiv Baal HaGemara. The Baal HaGemara is being Meshiv. This is what we call the Stammer Talmud, the narrator of the Talmud. I mean, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that on the 8th day doing the Sachim? And the Gemara then explains, right? You don't say it on the 1st day because on the 1st day there's no hint. The hints only start on the 2nd day. From that extra mem. So then Shmini Nami on the 8th day also. Are you able to say that on the 8th day you do Chamayim? On the 8th day, there's no hint. There's only a hint on the 7th day. The mem yud mem. We have that word ma'im ksiv v'shvi, which is the word kamish batam. The siyim kroy the nisach ma'im v'shvi ksiv kamish batam v'le b'shmini. So you have no hint then to tell you anything about ma'im on the 8th day. So why is you saying that Yehuda Meseira holds that you do nisach ma'im on the 8th day? You do nisach ma'im on the 7th day. You start on the 2nd. That means you only have 6 days. You don't have 7 days. So the more is attempt to fire Yehuda Meseira. So Yehuda doesn't work. Another thing more said, Maishna, excuse me, we just did that one. The next Rashi, El Rabbi Shuhi, keep eyes open very clearly on these first lines of Rashi. El Rabbi Shuhi, it's Rabbi Shua that we're saying is the Tana who says that you do Nisach Hamayim all 7 days, and it's Halacha Moshe Sinai. Rashi, the Amar Mishas Anachosoi Dainu B'Shvi. That means from the time that you put it down, which is on the 7th. Remember the Rashi that we had yesterday in the middle of the page on Beis and Beis, right, where Rashi said Mishas Hanachasa. What did Rashi say? From the day when you bench on the end, the Hainu Bishvi, that was on the 7th day. Okay, so you see again similarly that what the Amar Mishas Hanachasa, the Hainu Bishvi. You see that very similar. Yes, let's keep that in mind. So when do you start saying Mashiv Barach? Mishas Hanachasa, the Hainu Bishvi Maski. You only start doing it on the 7th day. But Afal Pikain, start with the Nisach Hamayim Kol Shiva. And even so, Rabbi Shua still says that Rabbi Nisach Hamayim goes on for all 7 days. Why? The Gemara Gemila, it's a Halakha Moshe Sinai, the Nisach Hamayim Kol Shiva. Now we get to the Rashi that I mentioned outside before. Says the Rashi, V'adai Kirav Lezer also Shabir. Of course, according to Rabbi Lezer, who holds that you do Mashiv Arach all 7 days. Of course, it works out according to Rabbi Lezer. That's not a question. That was never in doubt. Aval Rabbi Yehuda Meserach Rabbi Akiva Leimen Tukma, but it didn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda Meserach Rabbi Akiva. Elohachi Loy Mukila Rabbi Lezer. But this is the reason why we didn't want to put it on like Rabbi Lezer. The Halam Ibai Rabbi Lezer Sfir Leihachi. The Vadi Rabbi Lezer as a shaper. We didn't ask Rabbi Lezer not because we're in doubt. We know it works according to Rabbi Lezer perfectly because Rabbi Lezer holds that you start saying Mashav on the first day. Then obviously you have all 7 days of Mashav Ruach, so you can have Nisach HaMayim all 7 days and it works out swimmingly. That's a water reference. Yeah. V'had de kamukim Rabbi Yeshua Rebusa Kamash Milan. This that was saying it's like a Yeshua. It's a Rebusa. It's extra. It's super extra, right? Because we're trying to tell you the worst possible shita that would never work, and even works according to him, meaning that it's a Rebusa ba'alma. It's a addition because we know it works according to Rabbi Lezer. So that's the answer of Rashi, right? Ultimately, does it work according to Rabbi Lezer? 100%. Why don't we say it? We know. It's Pashut. Everyone knows. Why are we saying Rabbi Yeshua? Because we want to be Talmudists. We want to be making Rebusas. We want to show you that it can even work according to Rabbi Yeshua. And then continues Rashi. But it doesn't work nicely according to Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Yehuda, remember what I said to you that maybe according to the way when the Gemara says Rabbi Yeshua, does it work according to Rabbi Yehuda and does it work according to Rabbi Kiva? I said maybe not. Or maybe yes. You can make both arguments. If you say that it doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda and say according to Rabbi Akiva, so then you have a problem with Halacha Machlekes, which would be a problem for the Rambam. If you do say it works out, then and we're just explaining Rishu because that's the further shita, so then that would be the way to explain it. But Rashi is clearly taking the position that it doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda and Sarah. It doesn't work out according to Rabbi Akiva, says Rashi. So you see that really it should be V'nisach Hamayim should only be Vav Yamim, not what? Not 7 days. The Yulei Mafik Rishon, he doesn't hold of the first day, because no hint then, and you don't hold of the 8th day. Misham Hani Percha, the Parafel, because what we asked already before. So let's say Rabbi Kiva Yov Mina Sacher. Rabbi Kiva, you have the word in Sacher, which is number Shishi. How much of these Sachamayim have elements for you? So you see, the Sachamayim only works out 2 days. Rabbi Shuma took but according to Rabbi Shua, it works out well. Therefore, you only mention Mashav Ruach on the last day. Listen to Rashi so carefully. The Geshamim b'chag siman klala, because rain on Sukkot is a siman klala. Avon nisach hamayim kol shiva the Gemara gomer lo, but nisach hamayim all the 7. That's okay because that's halacha Moshe Sinai. So again, this has implications, like I said, for that wider machlekes about the nisach hamayim, and also has implications for what is Rashi Shita in terms of Rabbi Yeshua. Right? Listen to Rashi over here. He says, "Avok Rabbi Shuma tukmo lefikachim askirin el b'yamtev ha'acharayin." What does that mean? Yamtev ha'acharayin is not the Yantav Achar mean the 7th day. Yantav Achar sounds like Shmini Atzeres, right? El Yantav Achar they gesham bechag siman klala. So how does that work with the previous 2 Rashi that we saw? So if you look in your base in the bottom, I don't know if you have in your Gemaras, guys of Merav Ranchberg. So if you look at the guys from Merav Ranchberg, he says that he's bothered by our questions that we said that if you look at these 2 Rashis that we mentioned yesterday, based on and Mishas Hanachase, and here at the top of this big Rashi of El Rabbi Shua, it sounds like Mishas Hanachase, the Hainu B'Shvi meant that you start saying Mashav Ruach then. But the guy from Rav Ranchberg says, but it clearly doesn't mean that. It has to mean that you only start it later at night. You only start it later by the Shmini Atzeres. Okay. So now we have a couple of short little Gemaras. Yes, says the Gemara. Rabbi says the name of Rabbi Shua. Says Rashi over here. I love this. Another clear to me proof that this is not the normal Rashi that Gemara said. Look at Rashi. Ke'ein Omar Marhu. This is like an Omar Mar. Right? Does that sound like anywhere Rashi? Like it's like an Omar Mar. You never hear that before. Right? Right? All we're saying is that this is what Rabbi Yehuda said, right? If you remember the Bryce that we quoted yesterday, this is exactly a quote from that. It's a really long Amar Mar. So we learned absolutely nothing new right here. It's literally what we said yesterday. Yes? Okay. So says the Gemara now question. So we said that Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that when you go up to Davin on the Yontav Achar, the Baal Musaf, he's the one. Right. However, right. The Baal Musaf is the one who says Mashav Baruch. Harishain Einay Mashav. The Baal Shachris doesn't say Mashav Baruch. Right. You have the tefillah of Geshem is the Musaf tefillah. You don't have by Shachris. So the Gemara says Hey, Rabbi Yeshua, which Rabbi Yeshua is it? What do you mean, which Rabbi Yeshua is it? Elam, Rabbi Yeshua the Mas Nisan. If it's Rabbi Yeshua of our Mishnah, what did Rabbi Yeshua of our Mishnah say? Ha'amar b'yayim toifa achron shel chagul maskir. Rabbi Yeshua said that you say that. Look at in the Mishnah for a second. The Mishnah says, third line, second line down. So the Mishnah says Rabbi Yeshua, I remember Yom Tov achron shel chag. Rabbi Elazar says you start saying Mashav Ruach on Yom Tov Rishon, and on the first day of Sukkot. Rabbi Yeshua says Yom Tov achron shel chag. What's the Yom Tov achron? That's Shmini Atzeres. So the Gemara is asking, hey Rabbi Shua, this Rabbi Yehuda says in the Rabbi Shua that you start saying it by the Baal Musaf on the Shmini Atzeres and not the Baal Shacharis. Hey Rabbi Shua, which Rabbi Shua is it? Elam Rabbi Shua the Mastis. If it's going to Rabbi Shua of our Mishnah, he said that when do you start saying it? He starts saying it on Shmini Atzeres. And what's that mashmayis? That mashmayis is that you're already saying it at night. You're already saying it by Shacharis. We didn't hear anything about not saying it by Shachas. If you look at the end of the Mishnah, you say Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Look at the end of the Mishnah, you'll see that. But that wasn't Rabbi Yehuda the name of Rabbi Shua. In the Mishnah, just Rabbi Yehuda says, but the only mention that we have from Rabbi Shua's opinion, Rabbi Shua says, you only say Yontav When is Yontav Shmini Atzeres? It doesn't say by Shachas or Musaf. The assumption is for sure by Shachas, you probably start saying it by the night. And if that will fit very nicely with these Rashi that say Rabbi Shua's mashma that he starts saying it at night. May Orta, remember the Rashis. So according to Rabbi Shua, you start saying Mashav Ruach when? At night. Shmini Atzeres. Meshas Hanachasai, right? You put it down on the seventh day. After you already daven, you put it down. Right? So at that point, when's the next time you're davening? At night. At night's when you start saying it, or the next morning is when you have it said. But you don't have it, that you're saying it by Musaf. That's not the pin Rabbi Shua. So on that, says the Gemara, no, that can't work with the Rabbi Shua of our Mishnah. Rabbi Shua of the Brisa. It must be Rabbi Shua of the Brisa. Remember the Brisa, what did Rabbi Shua say in the Brisa? Rabbi Shua said he disagrees in some bays right in the middle. Rabbi Shua says no. That when do you start saying Mashav Ruach? Mishas Hanachos, when you put it down. When you put it down on the seventh day. So when you start saying it on the eighth day, when by Shachas, by the evening, whatever, but it's certainly not by Musaf. So the most it can't be that. Says more, hey Rabbi Shua, Elam, Rabbi Shua, the Masis, and Amud Yomi, when do you start saying it on the eighth day? Rabbi Shua, the Brisa, you want to say, Rabbi Shua of the Brisa, then that can't be either, because he also says you put it down on the seventh day, and that's when you start saying it. So it's not by Musaf on the eighth day. So says the Gemara, and I'll ask you another question. On the Tanya Behuda, we have a Brisa that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Ben Beseira. We have a Brisa that Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Ben Beseira. That somebody goes up to Daven on the Yantav Achron Shel Chag. So the Ha'achron is maskir. The latter person, meaning the person who is Baal Musaf, he's going to be maskir. So this Rabbi Yehuda is saying in the name of Ben Beseira, that you're doing it on the Yantav Achron Shel Chag, and only the Baal Musaf is being masked. Hey Ben Beseira, which Ben Beseira is it? Ilam Baruch Ben Beseira Ha'am B'Sheni B'Chagul Maskir. It can't be Ben Beseira of our Mishnah of our Brisa, because he said you start saying it on the second day. That was the hint of Mayim. So we have a question about Rabbi Yehuda, who's he quoting when he says the name of Rabbi Shua? And we have a question about this Rabbi Yehuda when he's quoting Ben Beseira, who sounds like he's saying it on the eighth day. That doesn't fit. That doesn't fit because Rabbi Beseira says you start saying on the second time. Let's say that what we're talking about is Rabbi Shua ben Beseira. That's both. It's going to answer both of these questions. Rabbi Yehuda in the Brisa quoted the name of Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Yehuda, Mishum Rabbi Shua. It's not the Rabbi Shua of the Brisa. This is what you would have thought. It's from Rabbi Shua ben Beseira. That's Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Shua ben Beseira is a different shita. So what's Rabbi Shua ben Beseira's shita? Rabbi Shua ben Beseira's shita is that he starts saying Mashav Ruach on the eighth day by Musaf. That's the shita. And so therefore, sometimes we call him in his own name, sometimes we call him the name of his dad. So sometimes we call him Ben Beseira, sometimes we call him Shua ben Beseira. And what's the difference? Sometimes we have it before Smicha, then we call him Ben Beseira. Sometimes we call him after Smicha, then we call him Shua ben Beseira. We literally, for those who are here on Sunday, we literally just had this Gemara Sanhedrin Mem Aleph on the Sunday class. We talked about Ben Zakkai. So that we had a member of Rebbe's quoting Ben Zakkai. Who's Ben Zakkai? And the Gemara says, in the end, what? Ben Zakkai is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. But this Mishnah was told when he was a precocious kid. That's what was called Ben Zakkai. But later on, it becomes Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, but we didn't change it. We still kept it from the member of Ben Zakkai, because that's how we learned. So there will be the same thing. This should be who's quoting Ben Beseir when he quoted it before he had Tzmicha. And afterwards, when he quotes him here and then Brisa, Mishum Rabbi Shua, It's after we already had smicha. Now it would be a little bit better if we said B'Shua ben Beseira and our brisa, but okay, we'll leave that. But our point now is that we have an answer to the question of Rabbi Huda quoting Rabbi Shua in the brisa was not quoting Rabbi Shua, the Tana who says that you start on the 8th day, because when you start on the 8th day, you start at the beginning of the 8th day. Shmini Atzeres by night, you start saying it. We're quoting Rabbi Shua of Ben Beseira, and he holds that you start saying it on the 8th day by Musaf. I'll stop here.